Hi, I'm Kane Ulahan, National Policy Advisor on Immigration for Forward Latino. I'm also an immigration attorney and the founder of Ulahan Immigration Law. Forward Latino thought it was extremely important in these concerning times to put together a video so that people understand their rights and what they should do to be prepared in case they have an encounter with immigration officers. We're going to be providing this information in both English and Spanish.
I want to start this presentation with some updates on the state of immigration law and policy right now. And we're going to go over a few points that I think it's important everyone know about. First of all, what's going on with DACA? DACA is essentially safe for now. As we all know, there were some lawsuits that were filed. The most important one was in Texas. It went to the Fifth Circuit, and basically that court said that only Texas had standing to sue. The rest of the country, DACA is available, so anyone with DACA can continue to renew it, and you can still request a permission to travel. However, we highly recommend that before requesting any travel permit, you consult with an immigration attorney to talk about any risks. So the only drawback right now is that initial applications are still not being accepted or approved by immigration. The Fifth Circuit did send the case back to the judge in Texas to potentially order USCIS to allow new applications, but that has not happened yet. So we need to be watching the news to see how that case progresses. And eventually, the lawsuit on DACA could go back to the Supreme Court for a final decision. But for now, the important thing to know is that DACA is available. If you have DACA, you are safe. You can still work with DACA. You can get your driver's license. And if you need to, and there's a good reason, you could travel internationally with a special permission called advanced parole. Moving on to the next point, it's important to understand that there are some programs that we previously had that have been ended by the current administration. So temporary protected status, or TPS for short, is a status that's under the law that any president or administration can designate certain countries to have protection. And right now, there are a number of countries that have TPS, but the administration has decided to end TPS protections for Honduras, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. There is some litigation ongoing with those cases. So if you have TPS and are concerned about whether it's still valid or if you have any other options, definitely talk with an immigration attorney. There's also been an effort by the administration to put an end to birthright citizenship. And this is a very concerning issue, as we have had birthright citizenship as sort of a bedrock immigration principle for decades. And basically, our Constitution says that if a child is born in the U.S., they are automatically a citizen. The president signed an executive order saying that they would no longer recognize birthright citizenship. Several courts quickly blocked that order, so it is not in effect. Any child born in the United States is still a citizen as they would have been before, and eventually the issue will be decided by the Supreme Court. So make sure that you follow the issue closely in the media and contact Forward Latino if you have doubts, or talk to your immigration lawyer. Another important point is there are programs that we call parole. Parole in this context is not like parole for someone who has been convicted of a crime. There's a type of it's basically permission for immigration to allow someone into the country without a visa. So for a number of years, many people were coming in with parole in order to pursue asylum. Well, those parole programs have been ended. And unfortunately, we don't have much legal standing to challenge that, as parole programs are basically discretionary by any administration. So many people who entered with parole had their parole dismissed or taken away. And so if you have that situation, again, talk with an immigration attorney about your options, because you may have some other options such as asylum or some other family-based option or other humanitarian option. The next point is to explain a bit about an accelerated deportation program called expedited removal. And it's important we know about this because it's an effort by the administration to limit people's due process rights. Normally, A person who's in the country without legal documentation has the right to see a judge before being deported and ask that judge potentially to stay here. So there's actually a process you go through to see if you have some application you could file, some way to stay in the country legally. But this expedited removal program takes away that right and says that ICE or Customs and Border Protection can simply remove that person from the country with no hearing. This is controversial because although the law says it can be done, it's supposed to be limited to those who are caught at the border, and it's supposed to be done right then while they're detained at the border or within 2 years of entering the country. But as we've been seeing, they've been applying it to folks who were caught at the border and released and have been here more than 2 years. And now they're trying to essentially go back in time and say, we can take you out of the country through expedited removal now. So again, very controversial. There are organizations trying to challenge this use of expedited removal, but it hasn't been blocked, unfortunately, at this point. Okay, moving on. Folks may not be too familiar with this next point, the Lake and Riley Act. It is a newer law, and it's actually the first law that Congress passed after President Trump took office. The only thing this law really does is subject undocumented immigrants to being mandatorily detained if they are arrested for, charged with, or convicted of certain crimes, including theft, any offense that relates to theft, like shoplifting, or any crime that results in a serious injury to another person. And essentially, in the past, someone in that situation would likely have access to requesting a bond. This law limits those rights and says that they would absolutely be detained. They would have limited due process. We have not seen widespread application of this law, but it's important that people understand that it exists. And finally, the other update I want to focus on is the alien registration requirement. And of course, I don't like to use that term, but that's what they call it. It's a registration requirement under our law for any non-citizen. So anyone who's not a U.S. citizen is by law required to be registered. Most already are because most have gone through some process, have been fingerprinted for some reason or another. But of course, we have a number of immigrants in our communities who have not been fingerprinted and not been able to go through an immigration process and therefore are not registered with our government. So there is a law that requires you to submit a form that says you're present if you've been here more than 30 days. And it's very tricky because we believe that, well, what is the information going to be used for other than initiating deportation? So folks, we highly recommend that you consult with an immigration attorney to understand your rights, possible consequences, or benefits to registering or not registering pursuant to this new requirement. Okay, we're going to move on from those updates and start the Know Your Rights materials now. And this is so critical because a lot of folks don't realize that everyone present in the United States has constitutional rights. Many people think that it's just citizens or just folks who have a legal status, like a green card. That's not true. Undocumented people also have rights. Visitors from other countries or are just here on a visa temporarily have these same rights. So remember that the Constitution applies to everyone present in this country. So the first one, and the one you maybe hear most often, is you have the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer any questions that an officer asks you, except for giving your name. That's really the only thing you have to tell them because they have the right to identify a person they suspect of some violation of law. And we're going to talk more about this right to remain silent and when it makes sense to remain silent and when it makes sense to speak up in order to assure that your rights are respected. You also have the right to a phone call and to speak with your attorney. Now, this is something that oftentimes the officers may not offer or tell you that you have, and you're going to have to ask them for this. So it is important if you are detained that you request a phone call. One thing I tend to mention is that while it's a good idea to know your attorney's phone number, and you can certainly call your attorney, it can be a good idea to have a trusted family member or friend you call first, because if your attorney's phone is busy or if your attorney is not available at the moment, you don't know how long it'll take to get another phone call. So It's a good idea to have a trusted person that has your attorney's number who can call and call again until they get through to your attorney to let them know your situation. Um, you also have the right to understand any document before you sign it. So, immigration is supposed to provide documents in the language you understand or give a translation of the document if it's in English. But the reality is that that doesn't always happen. And we have unfortunately even seen some examples where immigration officers have pressured people to sign when they don't understand and have even told them sometimes that they're signing one document when it's really something else. So, for example, they may say, you sign here so you can get out of custody. Otherwise, we're going to keep you detained. And you may actually be signing a stipulated deportation, which basically means you're giving up your rights and accepting that they deport you, which is not a good thing, right? So, absolutely, our advice and recommendation is to not sign any documents until you've had a chance to review the documents with your attorney and see if it makes sense for you to sign it. Another right that a lot of folks are not aware of is that you have the right to speak with a representative of the consulate of your country of origin. Now, remember, this is a right that you're going to only exercise later if immigration has already determined that you are not a U.S. citizen, that you're a citizen of another country, and that you may be detained or subject to deportation. Going back to that first point, you have the right to remain silent. If you're asked if you were born in the US or what country you're from, or if you have legal status, you don't have to answer those questions. But if you get to a point where they have determined that you're a citizen of another country, you have the right to speak with a representative of that country. And many countries have consulates that are very active and can provide referrals, resources, and some advice that can be very helpful. And I'll point out as an example, the Mexican consulate has a very active staff that helps with many different issues, including immigration. But if you're from another country, there may be consular assistance that you can have access to. Another very important right, the last point on this slide, is that you have the right not to open your door and not to consent to a search or for any officer to enter your home unless the agents have a judicial warrant that is signed by a judge. If those agents have an administrative warrant, which is a warrant from Homeland Security, not from a court, you do not have to open the door, and we recommend that you don't. And we're going to go into this point in a little more detail. You can see we've got examples of the different warrants so you can have an idea of how to tell the difference. The first image you see here is an administrative warrant. As you can see at the top, it's issued by the Department of Homeland Security. It's a warrant to arrest an alien or really detain an alien or immigrant. This is a warrant that is issued by and signed by some officer or supervisor within Homeland Security. It could be ICE, it could be Customs and Border Protection. This is not a judicial warrant, and it's important that you see that difference. Homeland Security at the top, the signature is by an immigration officer, not by a judge. And the reality is that ICE and CBP almost never have judicial warrants. They could have them at times, but it's very rare. And usually what they have is an administrative warrant. And they may show you that and try to tell you that that allows them to come into your home and that you have to open the door. And it's not true. So if they say they have a warrant, our recommendation is that you ask them to pass it under the door or show it in a window where you can see it clearly. And if it's not a judicial warrant, you do not need to open the door or consent to a search. If someone else in your home opens the door, make sure that you state or someone in your household states clearly, I do not consent to you entering my home. I do not consent to a search of my home. And it's also helpful if you're recording that so that you have evidence later that you stated that clearly to the agent. Okay, so that's what an administrative warrant looks like. Now let's look at a judicial warrant, which is, again, the only type of warrant that would allow officers or agents to enter your home without your consent. At the top, it names the court. So United States District Court for whatever district you live in. So I'm here in Milwaukee right now. It would be the Eastern District of Wisconsin, but it will be a different court based on where you live. But the common factor is that it's going to be a United States District Court. That's federal. At the bottom, you're going to see the signature area, and it's going to be signed by a judge. And if you look at the middle of the document, the different types of judicial warrants are an arrest warrant, which will state the name of the person to be arrested, and it should name where they live, or a search and seizure warrant, which would have to provide the address that they want to search and the specific um, items, whatever they're looking for needs to be listed on that warrant. So it's either a search or an arrest warrant, but the things to really, really drive home and remember are that it has to be issued by a district court, federal district court, and signed by a judge. That is a judicial warrant, and that's the only way immigration agents are allowed to enter your home without your permission. Okay, moving on. I want to talk a little bit about what to do if you actually encounter ICE or CBP, so federal immigration agents. Make sure to stay calm. I know it's hard. Everyone is scared right now. Anyone in this type of situation is likely to feel some apprehension, some fear, but it's important to stay calm because if you panic, you tend to forget what you need to remember, which are your rights and what to do and phone numbers and all those important things. So try to stay calm and don't flee. Obviously, sometimes folks have the sort of instinct or reaction to run when they feel in danger, but running from law enforcement can actually be a crime, and it can make your situation worse, right? Because you could be potentially charged with a crime for running away from law enforcement. So we recommend that you stay calm, don't flee, but ask the agent or officer if you're being arrested or if you're free to go. Again, this is a really important distinction between staying silent and requesting that your rights be respected. So you want to remain silent in terms, or you have the right to remain silent. If they're asking you questions, you don't need to answer those questions, but you need to speak up in order for them to respect your rights, because generally they're not going to just do that without you actually exercising your rights. And you do that by telling them or asking questions. So ask if you're being arrested because they need some type of probable cause to arrest you. And if the officer says you're free to go, then simply walk away. And you don't need to say anything else. Another recommendation is that you don't lie or provide false documents. Again, this is another mistake folks sometimes make due to fear. And some people may be working with another name or have false documents. It is, again, not a good idea to lie or provide false documents to law enforcement because it could be a crime. You could be charged and it could make your situation worse. So it's better to not to simply give your correct name and leave it at that. If you do have a valid immigration status, let's say you're a U.S. citizen, certainly state that. You're not required to carry any documents showing your U.S. citizenship, but certainly tell them that you're a U.S. citizen. But if you have valid immigration status, like a green card, a visa, a work permit, our recommendation is that you do show those. The law requires you to carry your green card or other evidence of your lawful immigration status. So if you refuse to show them those documents, you're likely to be detained, and then eventually that's going to come out anyways. So if you have lawful status, we recommend that you state that, and you can show your green card or your visa to basically verify that you have lawful immigration status. Again, a reminder is that you don't need to answer questions aside from giving your name. Any other questions, you can state that you are going to exercise your right to remain silent. Okay. So now that we've talked really about the most essential rights that we have under the Constitution, we want to go through our toolkit. This toolkit is available at our website, forwardlatino.org. We've got a number of documents there that are very helpful. So a family planning to-do list, some information about what to do if you're detained and how to find your loved one who is in detention, a referral list of immigration attorneys who specialize in removal or deportation. Because again, not every attorney is the same. Some attorneys have really no experience with immigration law. Some dabble in it, and there are others who are specialists who focus only on immigration or who focus enough of their practice on immigration that they have expertise. And that's really who we want you to go to. Um, and then we also provide constitutional right cards in English and Spanish so that you can carry with you. Because again, in that moment of fear, if you're forgetting your rights, pull out that card. It's a reminder of those basic rights that you can read and then you can state to the officer. We also have power of attorney forms. One is for finances and property, and the other is for delegating parental power if you have children. Okay. So here's a little more detail now about our family planning to-do list. Um, the first thing we recommend is get your emergency contacts established and get a plan in place. The emergency contact doesn't have to be someone lawfully present, but it's recommendable and it makes things much safer for everyone. Um, so hopefully it can be someone in lawful status, whether a citizen, permanent resident, someone with some other lawful immigration status. Make sure they have a mobile phone and they're available, if possible, 24 hours a day. Someone who's generally going to be able to answer when you call. Make sure your plan details the actions your family should take in case of separation. Now, the second point is to organize your immigration related documents. And that's key because if you're requesting a bond to get out of custody, if you're requesting some type of relief in immigration court, like an application you file to stay here, you're going to need documents, evidence to support your case. So make sure documents like any immigration documents like your visa, your passport, copies of your green card, birth certificate, work permits, any immigration papers, receipts that you get from immigration, all that stuff is organized and in a safe place, but somewhere that is easily accessible to you. Um, and it's also recommended that you share copies of those documents with your immigration attorney so that they have them accessible as well, in case you're, for example, detained and it's difficult to get to the documents or your emergency contact can't get them right away. Okay, the next point is kind of feeding off the last one. Go ahead and establish a relationship with a licensed immigration attorney who provides removal defense services because some immigration attorneys are wonderful but don't handle removal defense. They may only do family immigration or humanitarian or work uh, employment related immigration. So make sure you've got have a consultation with an immigration attorney who does removal defense. Um, they can help you in a few ways. So first of all, they can review your immigration status to see if you have an option. You may have an option and have not even realized it, and in which case, getting your immigration status before you have an issue would be ideal. But they can also talk to you about options in case you're detained. You may have a defense to deportation, even though you don't have a way now, perhaps, to get lawful immigration status. You may have a defense you can present later, and you may be able to take some steps now to get ready to present that defense. Also, you want to review how you can contact your attorney if there's a detention and a separation. And so obviously attorneys' offices are open during business hours. So what is the recommendation or how do you get a hold of someone? What's the best way to get a hold of your attorney if you're detained in the evening? Is it contacting their office first thing in the morning? Is there perhaps a way to text them, sending an email? So talk with the attorney about that. You can also review your legal rights. This video, I think, should hopefully be very useful in explaining your rights, but it doesn't hurt to go over them again with an attorney directly. You can also provide, as we mentioned, copies of your immigration documents so the attorney has those on file and has them at the ready in case they're needed. And then it's a good idea that if you can, to memorize your immigration attorney's phone number. When people are detained, they frequently have their possessions, including mobile phones, taken away. So if you don't have access to your cell phone where your numbers are saved, how are you going to call? So it's important to try to memorize those couple of important numbers, your attorney, for example, and your trusted emergency contact. The next point that we want to emphasize is getting powers of attorney established to manage your personal affairs. Having this done ahead of time is going to save so much trouble later. Obviously, we hope that no one goes through being detained, but if you are, having powers of attorney will allow um, the person you designate, so we call them the agent, to make decisions on your behalf. So the power of attorney for finance and property will allow your agent to make decisions about your home, if you own a home, any property, your bank accounts, for example. Make sure that they are making the decisions that you would make if you were available, but you can't right now. Then there's the power of attorney for delegation of parental power, which only applies if you have children. Some folks worry about this because they think, well, I'm giving my custody over to this other person, and that's not the case at all. This document just allows that person to make the decisions that you're not available to make and make sure your children are safe while you're detained until you're available to do those, to take those duties over again and make those decisions again. So it only goes into effect when you're not available. And it's not in effect anymore when you come back. So say you're detained for a month. During that month, and you're not available, your agent could make the decisions, for example, about taking your child to the doctor, and maybe they need to approve a medication your doctor says they need, or a procedure, um, making sure that they're picked up from school. But if you're released, let's say after that month, that power of attorney is no longer in effect, and you are the one making decisions again. It's really just a safeguard to help protect your children and someone responsible to make decisions when you're not available and only when you're not available. So, in order for someone to be an agent on your power of attorney, they have to be at least 18 years old or older, and they have to be competent, meaning that they're able to make decisions, they're of sound mind. And it's recommended, not required, but highly recommended that they be lawfully present in the United States. Um, there's no requirement that the power of attorney forms be notarized, but we recommend you do so if possible. It just sort of makes it a little more official and can help avoid any problems later on. The next point is to, and it may seem obvious, but avoid criminal activity and contact with people engaged in criminal activity. We know that most folks are not trying to go out and get in trouble, but we can be more careful and try not to put ourselves in situations where something could go wrong. So make sure to follow the laws, avoid actions or interactions with people who are engaged in those types of behaviors. So you got to be careful. Everyone likes to, have some leisure time, maybe go out and have some fun, but absolutely you do not want to get into a car and drive after drinking, for example. You do not want to get into a car where other people have been drinking and driving or have drugs in the car, for example, because even if you're not doing that or you don't have those things in your possession, just being with those folks and stopped by law enforcement, you could be implicated and you could end up with criminal charges. So, and even with minor offenses, this could complicate your immigration status. So, you got to be really careful about this always, but especially now. If you do get arrested for some type of criminal activity, make sure you talk to a criminal defense attorney, but also your immigration attorney, especially before accepting any plea deal or signing any agreements, because they could impact your immigration status. I see this all the time. Someone gets charged with a crime and they think, well, I just need my criminal defense attorney. They're telling me this is a really good deal. I should take it. Talk to your immigration attorney. What seems like a good deal for criminal defense may be a lousy deal for your immigration status. So it's really important you talk to both types of attorneys before any decisions are made. The next point is you got to plan financially, and this isn't always easy because we don't always have extra money, but this is really important. So if you can save up money, if you can find family or trusted friends who can help support you financially, if you come into a situation like this, you may need funds to cover a bond payment. There could be fines. legal fees for hiring an attorney or other expenses. There may be government filing fees if you're filing some application with immigration. And bonds, although they can be challenging to get these days, if you do get a bond, the minimum a judge can set a bond at is $1,500, and there's no maximum. So I've seen bonds frequently set at five, $10,000. So again, if you have some money set aside now, you can quickly jump into action to pay a bond, hire an attorney, those things, versus getting detained and then scrambling and taking days or weeks to come up with the money, and all that time you may be detained or potentially deported before something can be done. So this is really an important point and helpful if you can save up some money. Okay. Now that we've gone through those points, I want to talk a little about what to do if you are actually detained. We touched on some of these points, but we really want to focus in now. Stay calm, follow the instructions of the officer, but don't sign any documents without having them reviewed by your attorney. Again, can't emphasize enough how important that is because you could be signing away your legal rights. If you're lawfully present in the United States or you're a U.S. citizen, tell the agents immediately. Again, this is a balancing act. We say remain silent, and that's your right. But if you're here lawfully and you're a citizen or a permanent resident, for example, you should be telling them that because they should have no reason to detain you. Um, so again, the next point, it's important to make this distinction. You can exercise your right to remain silent, but you do need to provide your name because officers have the right to check names to see if there's a warrant for your arrest or anything like that and who they're dealing with. You have the right to refuse to sign any form until it's reviewed by your immigration attorney. Also, notify the immigration agent if you're the primary caregiver to a child or have a medical condition that requires medication, medical care, or you're pregnant. They are supposed to make some accommodations for these issues. That is an important thing to let them know. If you're detained, you need them to know that you have a prescription medication because, again, they're not going to just assume that. You need to make sure you start the process. Every detention facility has a process by which you can request medical screening or medical attention, and they can approve your prescription medications be given to you, but it's a process. So you need to make sure that's stated from the beginning so that there's not a delay. Moving on to some more points. During the detention process, try, if you can, to write down the name and phone number of your officer because that's going to come in handy later when your emergency contact or your immigration attorney are trying to find you and who should they contact. Immigration is a big bureaucracy, so sometimes locating the right officer who's in charge of your case can be hard. So if you can get their name and phone number to pass along to your trusted emergency contact or immigration lawyer, that's very helpful. Also, try to get your alien registration number or A number for short. Sometimes it's on forms referred to as the file number or even the USCIS number. But the important thing is it's a 9-digit number issued by immigration. It'll have 3 digits, then usually a dash, three more digits, another dash, and then the last 3 digits. So it's a 9-digit number, preferred most of the time as the A number. That A number is going to help us again locate you, see what facility you're being held at, find out if you have a court case and if you have a hearing. It's very important because the A number will be associated with your case throughout any immigration process. If you don't already have an A number, they will assign you one when you're processed by the immigration agents. We also, again, want to reiterate, don't lie or give false information. That could be charged as a criminal act, and it's going to worsen your situation. So we really recommend you don't do it. The officials are required to allow you a phone call, and you can call, again, a family member or other emergency contact, your attorney. If they don't offer you the call, you can ask for it. But keep this in mind, and this is so important. Your phone calls from detention are not confidential if you are talking to anyone else but your attorney. So if you're talking to a family member, a friend, uh, a coworker, it doesn't matter. They can be listening to those phone calls or recording them. If the call is between you and your attorney, it is privileged, and therefore they can't listen and they cannot use anything you say with your attorney against you. So just keep that in mind. Um, you're going to want to limit the information you talk about with anyone besides your attorney because whatever you say can be used against you in your removal proceedings. So I would keep conversations with your family and emergency contacts basic. Focus on what's really important, which is perhaps where you're being detained, what, if anything, the agents have told you about what's going to happen next. But don't talk about your immigration status. Don't talk about even your documents, because if you talk about for example, your Mexican passport, you've now admitted that you're a citizen of Mexico because you have a Mexican passport, and they can use that. So keep your calls with non-attorneys to sort of limited essential information, and then you can talk through details with your attorney, okay? Because that's privileged. Okay, and the next point is just make sure, and I kind of alluded to this, make sure you tell your emergency contact the name and phone number of your officer and your A number because they can use that to keep track of where you are, provide it to your lawyer. That information is essential. And the last point in this section is just if you are scared to return to your country because you think you're going to be harmed by the government or some individual or group, you should say so loudly and clearly to the agents. If you don't tell them that, you may miss your opportunity to seek asylum or other humanitarian protection. Um, so that needs to be very clear. And this is again only if you are afraid to return to your country. If you're not afraid to return to your country, you don't need to worry about this point. But many folks are afraid to return to their country. So if that's the case, make sure you say that to the immigration agent. So uh, now we want to talk a little bit about from the perspective of not the immigrant themselves, but what if one of your loved one is detained? What can you do to help? You can notify your loved one's immigration attorney and their consulate right away. The sooner you get in touch with the attorney and consulate, the sooner they can start to work on the case, figure out what's going on, what are the options, what resources are available. You can be the one to implement the family plan. Your loved one who's detained is going to have very limited ability to do much, right? They're stuck. So it's going to be the responsibility, it's going to fall on the family members or other trusted emergency contacts or friends to implement that family plan, to, get in touch with the people they need to take care of the kids, to make sure those powers of attorney are in place and they're in the hands of people who need them. Um, Now, if the person detained has been moved from one facility to another, for example, there's two main ways you can try to find them. There's an online option called the ICE Detainee Locator, and we've got the website or the link to the website right there. This is going to ask you to put in their A number and their country, or there's, I believe, an option to put in their name and date of birth. But again, having the A number here is going to be really helpful. There's also a phone option that you can call, and there's a toll-free number there on the screen. You can call that number to try to locate the detained person. If the individual is in the immigration court system or has a court date, you can find them with the A number by going to the link in point number 4 or calling the 1-800 number. It's an automated system that again is going to ask for that A number. And if they're in that system, it will tell you when and where they have court next. You can also check at that same website for any outstanding removal orders. So unfortunately, some folks have already been ordered deported or removed. And if that's the case in immigration court, you can go to that same website, enter their A number, and if they've been deported, it'll tell you when that removal order was entered. Um, Again, we have Forward Latino has a list of trusted immigration attorneys. Uh, the information you're seeing right now is my information. I'm on the list, but there are others as well. The important thing is that you find someone who has experience and expertise in immigration law. So we highly recommend that you get an immigration attorney who has experience and expertise. We also want you to be very careful about non-attorneys and oftentimes folks who call themselves notarios or consultants or have other names they've come up with to sort of imply that they can help with immigration cases, but they're not attorneys, not licensed, do not have any specialized knowledge about immigration. And it's very dangerous to work with someone like that. First of all, because they are not qualified to represent you. And second of all, because they're not licensed. And therefore, if they do something wrong in your case, it's very hard to have some legal recourse to fix their mistakes. Whereas with an immigration attorney, if there's a mistake made, there's a complaint process. There may be a way to point out the error and reopen your case and get things fixed. So, for many, many reasons, it's important to have an actual immigration attorney. And as I mentioned earlier, there are also attorneys who may not have any experience with immigration law. And while they have the right to, try to do cases, it's in your best interest to have someone who's really got experience and expertise in immigration law. We also just wanted to show you what our constitutional rights cards look like. So on the left, you'll see the Spanish version, on the right, the English. It's just a brief overview, very helpful, of the most important constitutional rights that you have. Again, this is helpful just to read through so that helps you remember them, or to pull out in a moment of fear to remind you of those rights. We've provided a line to write the phone number of your immigration attorney and the phone number of your consulate. And so even if you don't have access to your cell phone, you may have this card still in your pocket that you can look at and help remind you of your rights and those important contacts. Okay, so now I want to do a little overview of the powers of attorney. So we've got on the Forward Latino website both English and Spanish versions of both forms for power of attorney. We've got them for all the different states. So Wisconsin, as well as a number of others. So each state has their own version of this form. So you should be aware of that. And these forms are available for free. We have heard reports of folks charging, a bunch of money to provide these forms. Now, if an attorney is helping you fill out these forms, they may have a charge for their time, for their assistance filling it out. But the form itself, you do not have to pay for. So make sure you know that this is free and you can access it through our website. So this concludes our presentation at this time. We hope you found this presentation informational and useful. We've got lots more information on the website, forwardlatino.org. We've also are always available to help. So if you have an issue or a question, you can call us at 833-LATINO-1. That's Latino spelled out and the number 1. Or you can call my office, Houlihan Immigration Law, 414-501-3963, and we're always happy to help. Thank you.